Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How to Bring Banking into the ERP with FISPAN and JP Morgan Chase. My name is Megan, and I will be your host. If you have any questions for our speakers during the session, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can use the chat function to message me directly, and I'll do my best to help. Our panelists, Paul from JP Morgan and Clayton from FISPAN, will be answering your questions throughout the webcast, and we will also have a Q&A portion at the end. If they are not able to answer your questions during the session, we will be in touch with you directly by email with an answer after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send everyone a copy of the recording once it's ready. Now I'd like to introduce Clayton, who's going to get us started.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for taking the time today to join us. I imagine most of you had to sneak out to some competing Zoom meeting to be in our Zoom meeting, so I appreciate that. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Clayton Weir. I'm the co-founder and head of product and strategy at FISPAN. FISPAN's a fintech startup that is kind of helping to do just what we're talking about today, which is help try and take that banking and make it a more native and pleasing experience in the kind of ERP and business applications. Really lucky here to have kind of a longtime friend and partner of FISPAN with us. So this is Paul Margaritis from JP Morgan Chase. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Clayton. My name is Paul Margaritis, and I am at the JP Morgan Wholesale Payments Innovation and FinTech Engagement team, where our raison d'etre is really to focus on partnering with emerging FinTechs, much like FISPAN, and build some cool and unique solutions for our treasury clients.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for taking the time to be on the show today. So why are we all here? Outside of, I pretty much thought that I wanted to generate an audience for my COVID beard, and so you guys are certainly a deserving audience for that world unveiling. But more serious note, what we're looking at is really first we want to talk about the state of play in this. What's the break between banking, the ERP systems, the systems you use, kind of the treasurer to run your business and your daily lives? What's happening and what we can do. Beyond that, what we're looking at is what we think going forward the ERP's role is in the banking ecosystem, some of the things that are happening to try and bridge that gap between financial services and that. After that, we want to specifically talk for a little bit about the JP Morgan Treasury Ignition program that Paul's kind of helped build from scratch and what JP Morgan's doing both today and I guess on a forward-looking basis to kind of bridge some of these things and solve problems for you as the end user. And ultimately some of the strategies that you yourself, right, if you're sitting here as a treasurer or a director of finance and thinking about this stuff, some of the approaches you can take and some of the considerations you should take into factor when you're dealing with your bank, your vendors, your partners. So I know we have lots of time for Q&A, and we might, if we're technologically savvy enough, we might jump in mid-go with that. So let's start maybe talking about pain points, right? So what we're really here to talk about is the idea of, the client's really stuck in the middle between ERP and the bank. And so the numbers on ERP investment, and by ERP we just mean, the central business application you use to run, generally your financial aspects of your business, and probably a wide range of other business lines. So, North American businesses spend about $10 billion a year on ERP. They spend about $20 billion a year on transaction and treasury banking type services, right? And it's absolutely wild how there's these two pools of investment at that magnitude that we make every year. And there's still this huge sort of friction or this kind of silo between those two domains. And so from my perspective, kind of thinking on the ERP side, there's every kind of object or every sort of function within the ERP is effectively has some kind of a relationship with a bank product or bank data, right? Whether it's on your payable side and all the invoices and vendor payable stuff that you're doing outbound, whether it's on the receivable side coming inbound, your overall cash position and cash management, right? All these functions are built in here. And in general cases, lots of these functions are broken. I mean, Paul, do you want to talk about this sort of from the bank perspective outward?
Yeah.
To the ERP?
Absolutely. I mean, from our perspective in talking to clients, it really it really doesn't matter the size or complexity of the client. It's kind of what we kind of see is that the treasury team within our clients really always becomes this kind of hub for special projects. And Clayton, to your point, you know, the firms have made incredible investments in terms of the ERP systems that they have and the business systems that they have, and their banking relationships. And those special projects that these treasury teams typically take on are about connecting those two investments. You know, you're taking data from your ERP and you're trying to wed it to the data at your bank, to be able to make the appropriate business decisions and support the businesses as they grow and scale. So, you know, what we find is that, you know, it's challenging because, you know, each of these projects that they typically have, they're going into order and they're going into a prioritization against other investments at the firm. And, you know, to typically bridge those gaps, what these firms need to do is make a technology investment. So you're basically taking a treasury team, you know, going to the top of house with the potential technology investment and wedding these two systems and really competing against other pieces like infrastructure upgrades and UI upgrades for your product, and a number of other projects across the firm.
Do you have a specific thought as to why this chasm is so big? So I think you kind of hit on some of the things that make it hard for the client to make the investments to solve this, but why does it exist in the first place, right? If I'm spending 10 billion over here and 20 billion over here, why can't somebody hasn't figured it out, I guess?
Yeah, you know, I think historically these were two entirely separate decisions. You know, me as a client, I'm starting a business, I'm growing a business, I'm finding an accounting system that I need, and separately, maybe it's me, but maybe it's someone else in my small organization, I'm finding a banking relationship. And as I grow, some of these processes and some of these relationships need to change, and I'm oftentimes finding myself thinking, you know, to support my business, which is the ERP I need to go with. I'm not necessarily thinking, well, which bank does it connect the best with? Because a treasury team that I've yet to stand up is going to need that type of connectivity. So the level of strategic thinking is not necessarily, you know, something you're able to do while you're trying to grow and scale a business.
100%. A funny anecdote, we have one of our salespeople came from SAP, and he always says that this was never came up in the evaluation or the requirements. It always came up during the implementation process, right? When they sell SAP into a business, then you start thinking about these final mile things. And so, yeah, then it doesn't put pressure, I think, on those product organizations to solve it up front when it becomes kind of the system integrator's problem at delivery time, and the bank's problem, but more importantly, the user's problem if they're stuck in the middle. So, just clicking ahead here, I mean, I think one of the interesting things that we've learned is exactly what you've hinted at, Paul, which is as businesses grow, they come through their sort of maturity gap. When you're little, you don't need a lot or ask a lot from your bank, and you don't need a lot or ask a lot from your ERP. Now, you know, as you start to grow fast, especially these innovation economy type companies, right? They grow at exponential scale. Your treasury, your banking needs sort of start to outpace the sophistication on your internal kind of operational IT capabilities, right? You're going to not invest in ERP when you're in the kind of maelstrom of growth. And then all of a sudden, when you get really big and you're Coca-Cola or whomever, right, you have armies of people on your SAP and you hook up your 80 global banks and you figure it out, right? So those guys are happy. But I think the depth of sort of pain and those gaps in this sort of growth gap in the broader middle market, small corporates is what my biggest learning has been, I think, sitting with your customers. I don't know if you want to comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, and you know what, I think I'd say that, you know, we've seen this gap kind of exacerbate over the last few years, particularly with, you know, emerging technologies like cloud computing. You know, businesses are able to be effectively born global. I start a business, I get a few applications and I'm starting to sell across the world. Whereas 15, 20 years ago, you know, I'd start with a smaller domestic offering and try to grow it from there. So we're seeing this gap kind of hit clients earlier on in terms of their life cycle. And it can potentially be a pretty limiting factor in terms of marrying those business processes with those incredibly complex banking needs. And again, as you know, mentioned earlier, the technology investment that you need to make, particularly early in your life cycle, typically needs to be focused on building and enhancing your product, your front-end product to your customers, rather than spending the time to address those banking needs that you need. So really what you know, bridging the gap here is we find a lot of clients looking to us and looking to the bank to say, can you help me here? Because I'm trying to connect to you, and the easiest way I can connect so that I can scale my business.
No, totally agree with all that. I think the other thing shocking, I just kind of clicked ahead here and put some of the logos, some of the usual suspects you might expect a client to be using. And what has also surprised me, because of just what you said, is clients are so busy on growing their business, they let some of these back office projects go fallow, right? And effectively, at least with your clients, we've seen where somebody's using QuickBooks, which we might think of as a small business application. We sat with a client that was doing $2 billion of gross merchandise value, right? Maybe $500 million of normal revenue on using QuickBooks to run their business, right? So it, which is totally understandable how that, kind of transition falls later and later when you have so many priorities, but it puts more pressure on that system to act like an ERP. It puts more pressure on the bank to figure out how to smooth over those gaps and still service that client, as they transition or as they grow a really big business on a small business tool, right? And so it's just an interesting set of challenges from my perspective that I'm very empathetic towards those that are living in it. So thinking a little bit more, Paul, about the voice of the finance department in this, what their life is, where the pain really boils in. Do you want to kind of run us through some of these?
Yeah. I'll jump in on number one over here on limited resources. I mean, particularly in the middle market space, the treasury team doesn't necessarily have a business transformation function. It doesn't necessarily have the resources to assess what's the appropriate upgrade in an ERP, what's the appropriate level of connectivity to the bank. So you're really focused on kind of like a nights and weekends mentality around upgrading processes. Which is going to, create a number of kind of patchwork and band-aids around processes that don't really help the team. It doesn't help the treasury management team automate their processes, and it doesn't help them, really contribute their time to the more value-added activities where they can support the businesses and help those businesses scale. Layered into that really is that IT involvement required, because to make those business transformation projects, you really do need an investment in IT expenditure. You need a project that's going to build the appropriate level of file creation and generation and transmission from your ERP. You need to take in those bank feeds and be able to parse them out into a way that you can use them. So what we find is that clients really in this spot really are looking for that kind of low tech investment option to really, effectively flip it on, to turn it on, that connectivity to the bank so that they can start executing their tasks in a really integrated way.
No, totally makes sense. And what about number two in terms of like IT involvement in these, in the finance fund?
Right. Well, the finance team is really, they're competing, right? Because you need an IT project, you have to go to IT to request their investment in your project. And to the point earlier, you're competing against other parts of the organization. And decisions going to be made whether the investment in a front end upgrade to your application or a front end upgrade to your business is it's going to be weighed against a file generation capability out of an ERP. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge for clients.
When not only that, but like in lots of cases, and it's totally the right thing to do, is you outsource as much of that IT function as you can, right? So then all of a sudden, if you need to make a change to NetSuite or whatever it is, there's an army of people with billable hours show up, right? And it makes it hard to get the small things done, right? Everything becomes bigger than a bread box.
We've seen that quite a few times, and it's it's a change management request. It's documentation that needs to be filled out. It's a project that needs to be kicked off, and it's a big lift.
Yeah, big lift. My favorite thing, when we kind of done our worldwide tours and been staying with clients, I have bottomless stories, but the solution, right, because you're resource constrained and because it's hard to get, some of these initiatives from technology and automation perspective run up, it leads to manual processes. I sat with a relatively sophisticated company that they exported the open bills. So all the bills they had in their ERP, they export them to Excel. They delete the ones they don't want to pay that payables run. And then somebody made like a macro to make it look something like an ACH file that they could upload in the bank portal, right? And it just, from not just the pain of doing that, but the risk and control perspective. There's lots of things about it that are probably give you heebie-jeebies, right, if you're the CFO in that organization. But it's the way to overcome some of these challenges they found. We've sat with really sophisticated companies that still dump all the checks they get in the mail on the boardroom every month, thousands of them, and have a kind of all hands on deck fire drill scanning session on checks, right? Because getting the integrated sort of lockbox project with the bank was too much to figure out, or was hard to get prioritized from a resources perspective, or had failed a bunch of times. And it's kind of empathetic, and so we get that. This really pushes you into this manual way, and so it's from a time perspective and a risk and controls perspective, it's sub-ideal. If I had a pet project of one of the things that I think is really the most challenging, Paul, is that realistically, almost every ERP and accounting system that's sort of marketed in North America today is still very check centric, right? There's a discrete check object usually in these systems. They sort of are built with the idea that if you have to pay somebody, it most likely will be via check. And maybe if they're really modern, right, they'll kind of fully understand ACH payments. And so realistically for you, what that boils down to is, even if you want to use kind of all the fancy new and powerful payment methods that your bank is offering, right, you can't. You're sort of locked out of that as a client, because you can't store those details about your vendor in a safe and secure way. And so it doesn't work for ACH in a lot of cases, but it certainly doesn't work for virtual credit card or push to sort of card stuff that you might have some kind of strategic value for your business, right? And your friendly neighborhood TMO is knocking on your door. You just can't store the data. Or maybe you've hired like an AP automation procure to pay fintech, and you store the data there, right? Maybe that data doesn't belong to you anymore, right? And when it's time you want to switch or move on, maybe you don't actually control your vendor sort of routing data or those kinds of things. So I think that creates a lot of challenges as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you're working with the bank, one of the things that is that the data is your data. It's one of the benefits from going to a bank. And to your point, Clayton, all the banks out there, we've made significant investments in terms of digital payment capabilities. And here we are offering customers with, a number of different options for them to reach their customers and, their payers or payees. And really, at the end of the day, their treasury team needs to ingest those reportings or those reports, or is it an email address for someone, or is it a digital wallet? And to your point, we do see exactly, I see exactly what you see. I see a check first kind of, check first kind of position from like an ERP standpoint, with the slow progress to accepting kind of an ACH mentality. And then beyond that, it's still, a level of work needs to be done.
Yeah, no, totally agree. One of the other things that's interesting, so I think there's a challenge and an opportunity. So I think same as in every industry, the finance function has certainly been able to use more and more tools to do their job too. So there's, you're much more likely as you grow to have, your ERP sort of as the backbone on financials, but you may complement it with a TMS. Your business may have some kind of a platform tool that operates your business, right? Especially if you're in innovation economy. It may have banking and financial data in it. You may have hired, sort of an external fintech to manage AP or whatever it might be. And so all of a sudden you have sort of not just the old problem, right, of data that doesn't come back or get to the bank from your ERP. You have data that only maybe gets to one of those systems out of the four, right? And you need to keep kind of all those systems running. That problem was probably going to get worse, not better, right? I think there's going to be more and more apps that we bring in. But I think, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, I think we share the belief that that's also the opportunity here, right? It's, as a bank, you should be thinking beyond ERP as well. You need to solve financial problems for these clients where they consume and originate them way beyond it as well.
Yeah, there's a stack of solutions that our clients are using out there, and there's a stack of systems that they use for their different processes across the board, whether it's managing their HR component, their business component, their finance and accounting component. And really, there's an ability to deliver banking information across those systems in a simple and secure, in a seamless way that manages the data and provides you kind of that layer of banking on top of everything you're doing in a really contextual way. And so that, you can make the decisions you need to make across those stack with seeing that information and being able to execute with it.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I know kind of your favorite, or bankers in general's favorite topic, which is always cybersecurity.
Yeah, I love this topic because it's like every year we talk about cybersecurity and highlight the importance of it. And somehow every year it becomes more and more important because it's cybersecurity is incredibly important. And quite honestly, I don't think, it's of no, the bank cybersecurity is literally one of the most important topics amongst us. For us, we look out into the landscape and we're looking at the fintech universe, and we talk to a lot of treasurers out there who are doing this, and they're saying, there's a plethora of options out there for me. There's a number of API automation tools. There's an entire ecosystem of fintechs out there, but there's almost too many choices for me to make. And there's almost, it's too hard to request my IT team to assess the cybersecurity and the privacy concerns across these solutions. And what we've actually seen is that a lot of these treasurers are looking to the bank. They're looking for bank partnerships because, there's a level of assessment and a level of due diligence that's done in a banking relationship. Particularly, I can tell you from our network of partners, there's a level of oversight we provide in those relationships. There's a level of cybersecurity we demand of our partners. If we're going to bring a relationship to a client, it's something that we're going to want to assess from our own benefit and ensure that our partnerships and our security, both with our partners and ourselves, are documented and provided to our clients so that they can make the informed decision with their IT teams as a partner.
No, thanks for that, Paul. So we have a question here. I'm going to just jump to this live question because I think it's your favorite answer. How does JP Morgan determine their roadmap for additional functionality in your sort of ERP adapter offering?
Got it. So, one of the kind of guiding principles of my team and what we've built in terms of the ERP plugins and the ERP connectivity that we're going to go through in a little bit is that, we do everything in partnership with our clients. So, what the pain points are, what are the needs from a client perspective. They're not kind of done in an ivory tower. They're not done over here where we build something for 2 or 3 years and then present it to a client and say, look what we built you. No, we sit down with our clients early on. We discuss what it is they would like to see us build, why they want that built, to really understand those pain points and those challenges. And then we integrate that into our roadmap. As we talk to more and more clients and we understand what are those common themes, they become more of a priority on the roadmap and they bubble up to the top. So I can tell you everything that we build out of my team is really it's coming from our clients. It's coming from, nowhere but our clients.
I'd say the proof's in the pudding, Paul, on the opposite side. Like you and I have had lots of great ideas over the year that have absolutely been just dominated by the clients of JP Morgan Chase as being stupid or undesirable, right? And so it works both ways, right? We get the ideas from them, we test the ideas back against them, and hopefully the cream rises to the top always.
Yeah, and it's nice. Usually we're about 60% of the way there. But it's that, it's those client discussions that takes us to 100%. It's that vetting process that makes, something that's an idea into an actual capability.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just transitioning on here. So thinking about banking's role, in the ERP ecosystem, I think this is as close to a little bit of a commercial for me, because this is kind of our vision as FISPAN for the world, right? And so if you think about ERP, and we're using that as a bit of a catch-all term, but right, if you think this primary sort of omnibus business application that a corporate uses to run their business, those businesses are inherently platforms themselves now, right? It's actually seen some great stats recently kind of around the Microsoft Dynamics platform. They expect to, I don't remember the numbers, but let's say it was, if it was $1 billion in license revenue, they expected to generate from Office 3 or from Dynamics 365, their modern ERP platform. It was $3 billion in revenue that they were expecting to generate from the partner ecosystem, right? So the idea is now when you buy something like NetSuite or Dynamics 365, you expect them to have a wide range of modules, but you expect that they have an app store effectively now where you can go and hire some solution that works with your ERP that does the next job you need to get done, right? Whether that's HRIS or whether it's, payroll or whether it's, inventory management, there's always an app for that. And so our belief today as a company, as FISPAN, is that that's true of everything except banking, right? As we've kind of laid out here, leading up to this point in the webinar, there's a bunch of friction, a bunch of pain, and neither the ERP probably vendors themselves or the banks have fully prioritized making banking, an app that exists and works out of the box. And so that's what, that's kind of what the opportunity here is, I think, from your perspective, to come in, as JP Morgan and solve that. I think the market factor that's really put a lot of pressure on this is over the last decade, right, as we've been in this massive sort of wave of fintech, the business to business fintechs have absolutely come in here and been aggressive on this, from our perspective. They fully understand, you think of some of the really big names that have been, really successful, recent IPOs and those things. Those companies have absolutely come in and realized that the ERP ecosystems themselves are an important distribution platform. If you can get in there, you can not only market to corporates, but you can actually solve those problems, build on those things, and do that across all these, right? And so I think that's where this idea that the bank needed to maybe step up a little bit on that has come from, right? And so it's a massive opportunity that they've kind of highlighted in. And so you think of all these different names, we hear them all the time, right? A lot of these have done a good job of this. If you go and look on their websites, they absolutely do have, to some degree, connections out of the box, right? With a lot of and so I think that's kind of the, the state of where this has come. And so, now wave of response from banks in a multitude of directions, right? And so I recognize a lot of these as, sort of treasury, there's some names that Paul, but, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that sort of interplay and how they've kind of, carved that path out now, and that they're kind of, evolving, I guess, in their own manner.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've been paying close attention to the fintech ecosystem and what's going out there in terms of new and emerging solutions. And for us, it's really about providing all the options for our clients. And we recognize that there's some pretty powerful partnerships out there that we've formed and can form with some of these fintech solutions to provide, those enhanced kind of capabilities for our clients. Whether it's kind of in the relationship, we have on the supply chain lending side, or whether it's some of our integrations with some of the treasury management TMS systems out there. It's important for us to kind of look across that ecosystem, assess these partners, assess to the point earlier, cybersecurity and data security around these options, and provide an ultra, almost an ultra powerful solution that's joint JP Morgan and fintech partner to our clients out there.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Paul, I had a bunch of questions here just popped up. I was thinking we could maybe jump in on one of these here. So have you seen greater adoption of bank connectivity in any particular segment of customers or ERPs? Is the question.
Oh man, that's a great question. I have to say, particularly from the kind of like emerging growth sector, so kind of the startup sector, if you will, they're really taken a kind of tech forward approach with not only their products that they offer their customers, but also their products or their processes in house. If you're offering a very digital solution to a client, it's like you have to practice what you preach. So they're really looking for a kind of a tech first API driven connectivity when it comes to their treasury management functions. We've seen, I'm going to go through it again, and you're going to hear me harp on it, but like on the NetSuite side, we see a lot of clients in this segment using NetSuite and looking for that deep integration with their bank partner. To your point, Clayton, they want an app. They want to install an app into their ERP, and they want that app to be their bank. In Treasury Ignition, which we're going to get to in a second, that's exactly what we're looking to provide, that application that you install and turn on, and now you're connected to your bank.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that's really where we've seen the most is those innovative tech companies, not for profit. They seem to be relatively innovative the same way, in that they're often using relatively modern cloud-based tools. Those certainly are the early adopters, right? Yep. Where it's cultural. thinking of a funny story. I remember we had sat down in the early days of this with one of your clients who themselves are a very prominent API distributed tech company, and somebody had just told the poor treasurer, right, that he needed to bank at a bank with the best APIs. He wasn't 100% sure why or what that might do, but they could only bank with a bank that was, you know, technologically efficient, right? You know, that was cool with it. So
Yeah,
no.
and fortunately, we have a number of live banking APIs that are available on our developer portal for our clients to access and use, because, you know, open banking and the concept of providing the tools you need to connect are incredibly important to us. And, you know, API integration for your banking needs is you know, really going to drive banking into the future.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Do you think that, I mean, this kind of leads into another sort of question that just popped up here. So can you elaborate on how APIs and JPMC technology provide a competitive advantage? Do you want to just take 30 seconds on that? I mean, we're kind of, you know, obviously not in the right part of here, but you just kind of mentioned that, and that happened to be the next question on my screen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, APIs are really your kind of window into real-time banking, right? And that's the obvious goal from a JP Morgan, from a wholesale payments perspective. It's the ability to provide our clients the ability to pay and receive in any currency, anywhere, at any time. And you get to that with APIs, providing that kind of easy pipe into the bank for a client to ingest in the way that they want to ingest is really the kind of overarching goal of our open banking strategy. And what we've really done is kind of, you know, house that into our developer portal to provide, you know, easy kind of to understand documentation, easy options. And, you know, you can see the code, you can look at the project, you can set up the project to, you know, to code to the API and start ingesting it. That provides that, you know, real driver to that future of you know, real-time banking. And, you know, to succeed in the real-time banking world, you need, you know, a robust set of APIs that are connected and integrated into you know, into various systems, into various TMSs, or just are readily available to a client to code to in a way that they want to code to.
And I think it's an important distinction, right? I think a lot of times when we're talking about solving kind of these ERP channels, there's a couple phases to this race, right? So in the short term, what everybody I think usually is thinking about here is how do we kind of get a file out of one system into another system, right? And when JP Morgan wants to give me a file back 2 days later, how do I get that one back into my ERP? But in this API world, it's all going to be much more continuous and real time. And our expectations as a business of knowing where that wire went or knowing how much money I have at any given time are going to change, and the bank's going to be able to provide a way more discrete and real-time experience around it. And that's a lot of what API is about as well.
Yeah, I mean, and think about your, you know, your core treasury reconciliation process. I mean, APIs provide you the ability to do recon, you know, weekly, daily versus monthly. It's that live feed that's already integrated. Again, that's a call. It's not, you know, a file that needs to be parsed and processed and uploaded. It's, you know, it's, you log in and it's there.
Yeah, cool. Let's keep going. There's actually some more live questions, but I'm nervous of my ability to manage time. So, you know, to kind of wrap that, right, this is what we see now is the same way that, you know, you can go and there's an app in the App Store that we want to put the JP Morgan app in the App Store. And so if you're in one of these ecosystems that the bank supports today, Paul, the idea is that you can, you know, kind of find the app and download it and install it. And it's a business level user, and you don't have to have an army of guys with pocket protectors kind of doing it for you, right? And that's the future of probably ERP banking and financial services, right, to businesses from my perspective. But so yeah, that's the point there. So when we think about that, right, on that being true, I think the one thing is to start thinking, if I'm sitting here as a treasurer watching this, think a little bit about my options, right? And so I always really wanted to be a McKinsey consultant, but wasn't smart enough for that. So this is my 2x2 matrix that's probably not going to become widely adopted in the industry. But a long story short, if you're thinking about this, right, on two dimensions, of all the things you can be doing as a treasurer to get these outcomes we're talking around automation and convenience and higher visibility and better cash position, there's a continuum of efforts, I think, that you can put in, Paul, and there's obviously a continuum of outcomes in terms of how powerful these solutions are going to be. And so, you know, if you start to think about this in the upper left corner, right, we've seen clients, they've built things into NetSuite that are beyond, you know, belief to me, like, of complexity, right? And how sophisticated they are, that I'm sure were expensive in terms of time and sweat and tears, and they're super powerful, right? And that is a reasonable decision for others, for some business to make. I think where you're trying to position this on Ignition is to be, you know, how can we get kind of 80% of the value in with something that takes you kind of 20 minutes of effort? I don't know if you want to kind of talk about how you see some of these different things.
Yeah, so, you know, what I'd say is that each of these kind of boxes you have here, they make sense for different client profiles. To your point, we've talked to clients that want to build those, you know, custom scripts within their ERPs to do exactly what they want to do with their, you know, with their bank, and they'll make that investment. And again, we've seen some pretty powerful stuff being done. There are other clients that, you know, they've kind of figured out some of the other capabilities like bank recon or receivables, and really they just need a payment file export. In which case, you know, and we could jump to the next slide. In which case, you know, you look to your bank to provide you with you know, with an adapter, with some sort of plugin to allow you to export those banks. And then there's other scenarios where, you know, you're looking for the option to connect your bank with a fintech to integrate some of those capabilities, or purely just looking for your bank API for those, you know, 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be, kind of capabilities.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And when you think of the two kind of boxes, so I have bank feeds on here. So obviously for a lot of clients, like getting that kind of, you know, screen scrape enabled overnight bank feed is great, right? It's no effort to you. You can get your transactions in. That's, you know, really, you know, it's really high efficiency product that solves some problems. It has some pains. You know, when we talk about these file kind of adapter type projects, these can be anywhere, from extremely high effort to extremely low effort, right? They're always going to be somewhat limited in power because they're not, you know, they are kind of very static. They're not going to be kind of, you know, closed loop reconciling things. And the same on the fintech side, right? Like these different sort of fintechs that can help bridge this gap are going to be way all over the map here in terms of kind of level of effort and the depth and breadth of banking or financial services they're going to cover, right? So just to be cognizant of time, maybe transition there, right? So that with that stated goal of how can we give you kind of the JP Morgan app in the App Store? How can we, you know, solve a lot of your problems with, you know, the least amount of kind of effort? Do you want to maybe take a few minutes and do a quick maybe infomercial on treasury?
My turn for the advert, right? Yeah. So, you know, from a banking perspective, it's all about, you know, providing the tools for our clients and to ingest the data and to work with the data. Or work with the bank in the way that they want to work with. And I mentioned adapters, and I mentioned some of the APIs and even some of the partnerships out there. But the core focus of JP Morgan Treasury Ignition, which is that app, is really a bank-driven partnership where we partner with FISPAN to develop those apps that sit within ERPs. You know, if you want to go to the next slide, you know, the goal from a Treasury Ignition standpoint is really, you know, no technology investment or no technology resources required to kind of integrate JP Morgan capabilities. It's a simple 15 to 20 minute installation process, and then you're effectively, as I mentioned, turned on to the bank. You could deliver, you know, a back and forth communication with your bank through your ERP to provide, you know, the different capabilities you would expect, whether it's payables, receivables, or bank reconciliation, all kind of integrated into your ERP. And, you know, we covered some of those pain points earlier. Again, you know, it's automated those treasury processes. It's low technology lift. It's a safe and secure host-to-host channel at the end of the day to the bank. That's really allowing your treasury teams to you know, gain incredible efficiencies, and, you know, and reduce the need for manual processes. Clayton, if you want to go to the quick loop video that we have.
Perfect. Oh, I think I missed the screen transition there for you. I'm not a very good.
No worries. So We're going to show you a quick loop video here, and I'm just going to talk through it as you see it. But this is an example of our JP Morgan app. And this is what Treasury Ignition is. We have NetSuite here. We have an installation of our JP Morgan app that took about 15 to 20 minutes to install. What a client would do is they'd actually, on the payable side, they see a list of their bills. They'd be able to select the appropriate pay type that they'd want from, to make those payments. We'd support the ability to store the information that they need to make those payables. And it's as simple as just clicking, a button and hitting the pay button. And it's off to the bank. The real core underlying principle here is let's address those pain points on the client side that I mentioned, but also let's deliver that user experience we're used to in our consumer lives, but in terms of your corporate banking.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. So your live questions are lighting up here, Paul. You have the audience Twitter with your GIF demo. So I'm just going to I'm going to try and amalgam a couple questions here. So number one, what have you heard from clients who have implemented something like this NetSuite adapter? What kind of impact has it had on their AP and treasury process?
Yeah, we've heard keep rolling out the capabilities. That's what we hear.
Yeah.
We hear from them, a lot of different feedback. We've heard it does save time, that this type of integration, it saves them time in terms of the treasury teams. It takes kind of a half day activity down to 20, 30 minutes or an hour. We found that a lot of clients that are using these types of capabilities, to your point, Clayton, earlier on, we actually find that it actually keeps them in the ERP longer than they traditionally would. So for a client that's using like a NetSuite, for instance, that might be, scaling quite a bit, growing in complexity, and start thinking about, a larger solution. Well, with offering these capabilities, it kind of, it signals to the clients, or at least to the treasury teams, I kind of want to stay on this. I don't want to have to rebuild this because I like how it works. And this really helps my team. So we see a lot of great feedback out there from clients.
So I'm going to amalgam a couple questions here. What is the integration approach and considerations if I wanted to use this plugin, like from a client's perspective? And B, is that different if I'm not currently a JPM customer? How long, kind of what I need from the bank? What do I have to do to get involved in this Ignition program?
Yeah. So what I love about this app that we built with FISPAN is that if you're thinking, if you're not, you don't have to be a JP Morgan client to test it out. We offer this in Sandbox. If you have a NetSuite Sandbox environment, you can install our JP Morgan application. You have to reach out to us and we'll do a demo and provide a whitelisting for you. And you can play around with it. And that's kind of the key of what we're building with Treasury Ignition, is we want to give you the opportunity to try it before you buy it, if you will. Does it make sense for your processes? Does it make sense with what you've built in your ERP? That's really critical for us because we want to make sure it is right for you. So we actually urge our clients to install it. Do you have to bank with JP Morgan to actually use this plugin? Yeah, at the end of the day, you do need to bank with JP Morgan to use this plugin or to use these applications that we've built in the ERP. But again, we're always happy to have that conversation.
Absolutely. I think I've through some of these questions, there's some hungry JP Morgan salespeople actually maybe out there listening in too. So you can always but on that perspective, it has this way of thinking and this way of delivering banking has changed the onboarding experience for a new client, right? Like it is massively different than in the old world if you're new to bank.
Yeah, this is incredibly different. And I think, again, one of the things that I think is one of the biggest differences is something you asked earlier on, in terms of, was one of the questions earlier on in terms of our roadmap is, I mentioned, this is coming from our clients. These capabilities that you're seeing right now and what we're talking about is coming from our clients. When we built this and Clayton and I did our roadshow, we had ACH payments. That was our first kind of capability we rolled out with this plugin. We had a ton of hypotheses in terms of what we should build next. Should we go into this payment type? Should we go into, should we start here? Should we start with this country? But what we did, we talked to clients and we found that our clients asked for check print. that was overwhelming what we heard from our clients. And what's different from this is that, that became our roadmap. And it's always going to be the case where we're going to listen to our clients and build what our clients are looking for.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. A lot of very specific questions in here that I think we might answer some of those offline, but and probably your favorite question ever is in here. I'm saving that for the end though. So, but there's kind of two different variations, Paul, of looks like from current clients that use Connect and like use your treasury portal and are really used to it, asking kind of how this like interplay affects that, whether it changes what they would do in Access today or those kinds of things. Do you want me to just comment on how this kind of interplays with the portal and whatever work you've done there to set up your release and stuff?
Yep. So on the payable side, we've kind of taken the position where if something is purely a data exchange with our JP Morgan applications in the ERP, it's just purely data. And there's not going to be any sort of barrier to entry with receiving that. So if we're shooting in bank statements into your ERP, we're going to deliver those. On the payable side, we understood, and after having a number of conversations with our clients, and particularly our clients' internal audit teams, we understood the importance of the banking entitlements that need to exist in the payables process. Most of our clients, when we spoke with them, they said we need some sort of maker checker rule on a lot of these things. And for us, these types of compliance initiatives are also incredibly important. So what we did was we built, this connectivity that goes directly into our banking portal. So all the payments you're making out of here are actually going to be bundled up and presented to you back in the banking portal, so that entitled users can actually get in there and make those final approvals and make those final releases. What we find is that a lot of clients are using that kind of piece there, not only as their maker checker rule, but a core part of their workflow and a core part to allow them to say, this is what I want to send to the bank. And then for the receiver on the other end to say, you know what, we forgot this piece of information. We forgot this invoice. Send these other bills or other payments back into the ERP, but push these other forward. And that right there is that kind of that two-way communication element, where this isn't just an extraction from the ERP to the bank, but it's from the bank back to the ERP.
Yeah. So Paul, there's a few questions here, and I realize we're kind of like, we have a few more slides I think we want to get to as well, but your public wants more. So effectively, there's a bunch of questions here around payment types. I don't know if you want to read out the laundry list. You certainly can communicate to all the corporates that are on here after what they are, but you're welcome to. There's some specific questions that I'm just going to answer quick around specific payment types. So there's a question here around kind of the virtual credit card product. Looks like it's from an existing client. And so part of the power of this, from my perspective, is around reconciliation, stuff like that. That for those of you who listening at home maybe don't use that, so something like these virtual cards, which are really interesting and powerful kind of addition to your vendor payables functionality, they have some very interesting and challenging sort of behaviors from a reconciliation perspective. They kind of behave in some ways like kind of the worst of both worlds of check, and for the person who's actually kind of marking them off in NetSuite. So they're asking here, Paul, about that product and about reconciliation. And so I think just simply from my perspective, that is absolutely the kind of thing where this plugin plays a really big role in evolving that product and making it very easy to use, very easy to reconcile, and kind of really elevates the experience around something like virtual credit card.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Things like virtual credit card that kind of take a lot of nuances and have their own complexities are the exact type of products we want to integrate and kind of help take away some of those complexities. So on the virtual card front, when you think about it, there's a lot of kind of nuances in terms of how you use it. Is my vendor swiping? Are they partial swiping? When are they swiping? Is it past expiration? Is it past a month-end close? So there's kind of a lot of, things to consider when using products like that. What we've tried to done with our integration is say, first let's integrate the payable piece, but also with an eye to whatever we build needs to assume or consider how you're going to reconcile that back in your ERP. our approach with SUA, for instance, has been that, let's deliver the ability to initiate SUA payments. Let's follow that up with the ability to integrate the reporting you need to reconcile in the ERP. Let's do our lessons learned with our clients and understand how they're using that. And then to the degree that we can help automate some of the reconciliation with how our clients are using it, we're going to, obviously explore and see how we can integrate those capabilities down the line.
Perfect. So let's just jump ahead here and kind of wrap up our last couple minutes of content, and then I can kind of do questions. We can kind of do questions as long as people want afterwards. So sitting here summing this up, right, from if I'm sitting here and I'm, the treasurer sitting on the corporate side of things, how do I evaluate all these things that are in front of me? What do I do in terms of next steps, Paul? I think we should take a minute, maybe tie a bow around some of that, and then we can kind of jump back into the questions. So from my perspective, the framework I would sort of use if I was sitting in that seat is you really need to look at your options from a perspective of effort and level of investment, right? So what can you do in a way that has, highest ROI? It's always going to be driven by what the I was, right, to get there. And so all of the different things you can and should do are going to be wildly different that way. And so that's absolutely a point of consideration. I think flexibility and control, some of these different solutions are going to allow you to dictate more customizability, right? The thing about sort of apps and as a service is that they tend to make things more uniform, right, in a way that works for everybody, but makes it work better and more simply. You need to think about power and scalability, right? So there's certainly scenarios out there, and I've seen a lot of this with smaller businesses where all of a sudden you can go out and you hire sort of 10 monoline fintechs plus your bank that are each doing one small thing, versus getting something that does a lot of things, right? And works towards system reunification. So thinking about that. And then as your kind of favorite one on compliance and security. And so there should be hard questions, right, about these kinds of applications. And when you introduce them to your domain, and that is, a legitimate part of this process. And so I don't know, is there anything you want to add in on this, Paul?
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to add here is that, use your bank. Particularly with us, with JP Morgan, you got to think about, we see a lot of different clients. We see a lot of like what works and what doesn't work. And, we're a resource to you. If for a client, you should say, for a client based on my profile and what you've seen in the market, tell me what works. What solutions out there have been good? What solutions have not been good? Why have they not been good, or why have they been good? And that should really help you make those kind of hard decisions in terms of, what you're building, what you're connecting to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that kind of transitions into this, right? So when you start, you have relationship with your ERP, and your other applications, you have it, relationship with your bank for sure. And you maybe have a relationship with some of these fintechs. I think there's some questions. And on the bank side, as you said, Paul, I think you should absolutely be advocating, right? Because when the answer to what systems is JP Morgan going to, add an adapter for, what products are we going to add in, that all is driven by the clients that are telling their TMO and are advocating for themselves and for what they want to see in this. That, is kind of it's a bit democratic that way.
Yeah, I think being your own advocate is incredibly important here. And, looking to your bank and saying, what are the tools you're building? What's the roadmap around those tools? What are other clients that are using those tools? What are they saying? Why it works for them? Why it doesn't work for them? And with your ERP, it's the same kind of set of questions. It's what works for clients? What's different about me versus some other clients, and how I'm going to use your tool? And will that make sense? And then kind of layering in the fintech ecosystem. To the points we made too earlier on legal and compliance. What are your processes? What's your SOC 2 reporting look like? What banks do you work with? What ERPs do you plug into? And what works and doesn't work?
No, I think those are all really powerful questions. And take a browse through the App Store, right? If you use a relatively modern ERP system, flip through, you'll find that there are apps that and some of them are heavier. Some of those app stores are heavier than other, right? There will be solutions, and ask your sales rep, what a standard stack of kind of fin apps that clients use. those kinds of things. So that, I think, is kind of the wrap. We're getting really close to time. There's still a little bit more questions. I mean, I think we're supposed to end at 11 and probably keep going for a minute. I imagine we'll need to drop afterwards to kind of get through some of these, but thank you so much to everybody, I guess, for your time and for showing up and spending time with us today. So I really appreciate it. And thanks to you, Paul, for joining. I guess while we have a couple minutes here, I'm just going to flip through and see if there's a few more questions. Lots of questions around payment types and sort of B2B and or sort of peer-to-peer type things, or kind of disbursement to wallets, stuff like that. So I'm probably not going to answer all of those, but I think absolutely, and one of these people is a high volume disperser, they say. We've absolutely had success with clients like that and are absolutely, I think, starting to add payment types that are consistent with that. And I think that is something that's going to grow, right? It goes back to the idea that the ERP, Paul, was built to write physical checks. And a lot of the work around this that FISPAN does and the Treasury Ignition program does is to extend and normalize those ERPs so that they can take advantage of these fancy things like, you know, the push to card or the wallets, and that those products, right, and the real-time network in the States are all valid and important tools that help businesses manage their cash flow and their business objectives appropriately.
Yeah, and I'll just add that in terms of Treasury Ignition, you know, our goal is to bring the power of the bank. And part of that power is, you know, looking at some of our larger scale projects at the firm to deliver, you know, through those digital wallets, through digital payments and options. And Clayton, as you know, we're taking a look at other projects and to do just that.
Absolutely. This might be your mom, Paul, asking this one, but I know it's your favorite. What are the client fees for JP Morgan Treasury Ignition Adapter?
I thank you for that layup, Clayton. So our JP Morgan Ignition plugin, an implementation of the plugin, and maintenance of the plugin are 100% free for our clients. We wanted to provide the solution to provide access to our clients to our core banking capabilities that they would use. We did not want to provide another roadblock or another toll gate to our clients. So I'm excited to say that the JP Morgan plugin is in fact free. And I will also add that if you are interested in a demo of our capabilities with either NetSuite or Sage Intacct, or to hear more about our roadmap of other ERPs that we're planning later this year, feel free to reach out to your JP Morgan representatives to schedule some time or to schedule a demo.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're just about at time here, so we can wrap it up and we can get back to anyone whose questions got missed. We have your email, so we can get back to you directly. Thank you so much, Paul and Clayton, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. Like I said earlier, we'll follow up with a copy of the recording by email and provide you with some next steps if you're interested in getting started. And if you'd like to learn more about FISPAN, please visit our website at fispan.com. You'll also notice Clayton's email here on the screen, so please feel free to reach out if you have any further questions. Have a great day.
Or kind comments. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.